Good morning, everybody. I'd like to invite you all to Green Jean Farms. It's a wonderful, beautiful day here, and we got a really nice group of guests from the Philippines. Of course, Manny is in charge of it. And every time he's in charge of something, it always works out. There's not much to tell about me. I've been born, I don't know if I was born or hatched. I always had chickens. You know, I've been fooling with chickens all my life. I just got lucky, and I was able to just grow up around several legends in the rooster fighting business. Mr. Kelso's trainer, Mr. Gilbert Coutois, he's from this area, and I was always following him around, grew up with him. He had breakfast at a restaurant where I kind of hung out as a kid. I was always with him. Anything he had to say about Kelso's, I just took it in, just watched how smart he was, how he moved, and he was a good feed at the time. He was ahead of his class way back then. And the Kelso chickens today are still famous all over the world, even though they're just a blend of 1,000 different bloodlines. Mr. Kelso's, he wanted roosters that could cut. So if he'd see one win the first kitten that he liked, he'd send Gilbert to buy it. He'd bring it home and he'd try it, he'd breed it. Everything was single-mated. He'd try one. If it worked, then he went to a bigger yard. That's why so many Kelsos come so many colors. There's a lot of typewriter blue in the Kelso, there's some whites in there, there's all kind of bloods in the Kelsos. And I kind of grew up with all that family of Kelsos and knew about them, and I helped several people train some. And that old man, they're responsible for letting Sweater have a rooster at Orlando. The cock they let him have was 3/4 Kelso and 1/4 yellow-legged claret. Sweater took that cock, went home, and 6 or 7 years later, he brought him a yard of chickens. They put it on the corner where I grew up, and they called it the Sweater yard. And the sweaters that we're seeing today, they're offsprings of the chickens in that yard. So they're a blend of different, and I'm sure that different blood, everybody added their own bloods to them. You know, now you see Sweaters coming out green-legged. You know, Sweater has some little blue-faced blood or some other kind of hatch blood in there, and the Thurbacks are coming out now. You know, so it's really interesting to breed chickens and just to see what's going to happen. You know, and once you find the good genes and whatever happens, you just got to keep on with that part of it. I trained for Harold Brown. He'd send me roosters at first, and I trained for him, and we were really successful. And then when Richard Bates went to the Philippines, I started going and fighting in the Copper State for him also. So yeah, Harold was a great guy. Harold was ahead of his class also. He had an eye for the looks on roosters, and I could have won a lot more derbies for Harold, but he had one bad habit. If I walked in his yard and then I picked up a gray rooster, a hatch gray, I had to pick up all brothers. He wouldn't let me mix them. But we did really good. And the first chance I got to get roosters, my uncle was involved with the roosters, and he had a few roosters. I got roosters from him, and they were involved with Mr. Kelso. Mr. Kelso used to walk hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of roosters in this area. All these roosters were put on fresh country walks, and then once a year they were going out and they would harvest. When they'd harvest, they'd pay the tenant. They'd give him $10 and pick up the rooster, and they'd put a new stag on the farm. The following year, they'd go back and get that stag, and that's how it was done. They were shipped by train. And on a Saturday, sometimes we'd go out, we'd walk 30, 40, 50 cocks. You know, and it was fun just to be with those old guys, and you'd learn a lot about it. You know, Duke grew up with Kelso roosters, and he became famous because of the Kelsos, and you know, he got the butchers and crossed them into that. He was fighting in this area also. But this area always had good roosters. Back then, you couldn't buy chickens like today. Yeah. So it had to be friends, and they would trade roosters with each other. You know, and that's just the way the families were carried on. It's just hard work. I mean, you know, you got to be with these chickens every day. But I guess one advice that I can give somebody is that everybody's scared of inbreeding or line breeding. If you think about it, every rooster's crossed up a certain way. You know, I think once you have a family, after a few years, it just becomes your family, you know. It doesn't belong to who the guy comes from. You can actually change a rooster. Family of Grays was Harold Browns, Red Richardsons, and Billy Rubles. Those were all the same chickens. And after about 10 or 12 years, those 3 different breeders changed those roosters 3 different ways. They didn't even look the same anymore. Because they added a little this, a little that in them, and they changed them. And you know, Howard's one was always a little taller and faster and could cut better. You know, Billy's one could do both. Billy was probably the best rooster man out of all of them, as far as for the total rooster man. Red, he wanted one that could win in 2.5 hours in a drag. He didn't want a rooster that could win in one pitting. He just wanted the one to get up dead and come back and win. And that's what he believed in. So he bred those kind of roosters, you know. But I think everybody now wants to cross chickens too much. I think if you can take cross chickens and just go through them and select the best ones and then start inbreeding that family, and you're going to see what comes out. You know, if you get a green-legged pilot that comes out, don't be scared. Or if you get something separate, try to breed to that pilot and see where that pilot's going to bring you. Sometimes you're going to be surprised. It's all through selection. If you start off with good, healthy roosters, when you start off with them, and you pick healthy individuals to breed, it's not going to change the health. Matter of fact, I've seen a lot of families that are inbred, they actually get bigger and stronger. Wow. I just messing around and just trying to keep some Ruble chickens from Billy that he had let me have, and I didn't have much of them. One year I had to brother and sister mated. Both times I was so surprised on how good these roosters were. One family was a straight comb family. I put them together on a clean-up derby at sunset on Sunday, and just went 5 straight, and those roosters were so strong in the drag and unbelievable. And they were brother and sister matings. And after that, it kind of clicked. And I started thinking about all the birds and the ducks and everything around here, how they breed for thousands of years, and it's still the same, you know. So I started inbreeding, but be real selective, you know, really, really selective. And then another thing about breeding, I learned so much from the Filipinos. I mean, the conformation. Back then, we would breed on roosters' ability and not worry about conformation. But now that we got to this point, conformation became so important, and now I see, you know, I can see why. And it doesn't take long to turn a whole farm around. If you start breeding towards one conformation, after a while the whole farm is going to have that same conformation. So you just got to work at it. I'm talking about actually body conformation and the way the leg sets on a rooster. Wow. You know, you select your pullets, and you'll be surprised within 2 years what's going to happen. You can change chickens around.
Yeah. Larry, how many do you hatch off every season?
Probably around about 3,000, 3,500, something like that. I like to breed pure ones. I don't like pure roosters that can't fight. You know, I want them to have all the ability of a cross. So when somebody comes here and asks me for a cross, most of the times I don't have them. Because, you know, I breed a lot of pure ones. I want pure ones to be to compete with the crosses. And I know sometimes you can cross, you know, you can put a little hatch in a little sweater, a little auburn in a little sweater, and you know, they'll be better. But still, I think if you're a good breeder, you can make those straight ones be just as good as those crosses. You got to be dedicated. You know, besides your family, they got to come second. You got to live with them. And you got every time you walk through them, you got to look for faults. You know, when I first started training roosters, Cecil Jones was one of the best trainers in the world, and he didn't have many chickens. He would just hire them and give him chickens, or they'd buy chickens for him, and he'd train them. And he told me, he said, when you walk in that cock house every day, look for a reason to throw one out. Don't look for a reason to keep it in. And he said, at the end of the two they would keep, he said, what you gonna have for that? It's gonna be hard to whip. And he was right. Well, I think if you notice, you know, the grass here, we have a lot of green grass, and all the babies are ranged. You know, nothing's raised in coops or in cages and stuff. And I know some people can't do it, but if you have a smaller place, try to cut your numbers down. Don't try to get overcrowded. There's nobody that can raise chickens and be overcrowded. They're not made to be kept in a cage all their lives, you know. Just let them run free as long as you can, and let them get healthy, and just try to be selective. Watch your conformation, watch your eyes, and just try to, they're gonna get better for you. Duke Halsey told me one time, he said, when you're going to get old, he said, look back. And he said, I bet you can't find 5 complete rooster men in your whole life. And I looked around and I said, oh my God, there's a lot of rooster men, because there was a lot of people here. You know, Carol was there, everybody was there, and there's a lot of rooster men. And then he caught me by the sleeve, and he said, I'm telling you, complete rooster men. Guy that can get up in the morning, go to the brood pen, put the brood pens together, take care of the chicks. After he gets out the cock house, start loading roosters and ship them. Sell as good as he's raising. He said, you're gonna be scared. About 20 years later, I realized that he was right. But Johnny Jumper was one of them. When I started going to the fights, Johnny was just starting to fight with Ray Price. And they started fighting them black roosters and Kelso roosters. They had bought that farm from Duke and they had him. And he was winning then. And as long as I stayed in Jumper was still on top. He was a good handler. He was a good feeder. Johnny was one of the best persons for roosters that I know. Johnny was sharp and he could handle with anybody in the country, but you didn't know how he could handle. He was always so polite. He had smooth hands. You know, he moved slow, and everybody liked Jumper. He never would rough up a rooster, but he was always in the right place at the right time to make a handle. And not many people can do that. There's not many good handlers in this country, and Johnny was one of them. And not many people, especially in this, could be so competitive, you know. We're always trying to kill each other. I mean, there's not many sports you're trying to kill each other. This is one of them. And Johnny was really competitive. And but Johnny had a way of being competitive and being liked. That's hard to do, you know. That's hard to do. Other guys are good at it, but when they walk in the pit, the first thing you hear is watch him. Johnny, you never heard that from Johnny. You know, you never heard anything. One time, I was feeding for Harold, and Johnny was going for the money. And we come up, and Harold told me, he said, look, he says, just be easy, you know. So I knew what he meant. So we building the roosters. I told Johnny, I says, you know, just take care of yourself. That's what I told him. He says, you go to your church and I'll go to mine. He was one of a kind. Good guy. But people don't realize how good Ray was when he was young. He was a good feeder, he was a good selector. And then his handling and pitting career didn't last that long because he put on so much weight. But when Ray was young, Ray was an excellent pitter. Excellent. It didn't get any better. When I started working for Harold and training for Harold, Ray had a lot of Harold's blood. A lot of Harold's blood. Ray was fighting a lot of hatch chickens back then. And he'd bring in roosters with beautiful feathers, and you know, he wasn't raising commercial, but when Ray would come to Sunset, maybe once or twice a year, you better get ready, because he brought bears, and he was always ready. I remember one time they brought him to Sunset, nobody knew who he was, and they stuck him in an old cock house. There used to be a nice house back there, or a slaughterhouse or something back there, and they stuck Ray in there, and everything else was filled up. It was kind of a make-do deal for him, and it was amazing how well he fought out of that cock house. He ended up winning the Derby, and he could. He knew something about chickens before everybody else did. Ray, of all the cockers in the United States, Ray Alexander was the first one to start breeding for brains. Everybody else wanted roosters with power and stuff. Ray caught on right away that rooster had to have brains. He made one trip to the Philippines, and actually when the Filipinos saw Ray's chickens fight, they clicked on him. Them clarets he had, the Griffin clarets, when he brought the Griffins out, he started, you know, He manipulated that blood. He got some kelso blood from down here and put that into him, and the little round haired chickens he had. Then he got the chocolate grays and made them good, but he knew what to add to those roosters. Ray always bred something for brains. He wanted a rooster to be shifty and sidestep, and he did it. You know, he was a good breeder. On the other Coliseum, it was Ray's tribute. I mean, every time Ray would go over there, you know, everything. I remember when they first built that Coliseum, if I'd fight a rooster, if I'd show a rooster at sunset, and it was the kind of rooster Ray would like, he'd always ask me, can I buy that rooster and bring him to the Philippines? And a lot of times I'd let him have it. And at the end of the year, when I was done fighting, Ray would come by, and he would, and my first custom in the Philippines was D.O. Plaza, the old man, through Ray. And it's because of the way Ray would select birds. They trusted him. He knew exactly what they wanted. All the old ones are slowly passing away, and the new ones, and you know, they're never going to fill those shoes because it's not legal here no more. We made a mistake years ago by not passing laws to try to legalize it, and I hope now that you know, like you told me, in the Philippines, that y'all can get together and pass laws to make it legal before the animal activists and all these guys in humane society try to make it illegal. Y'all need to beat them to the punch. Every year, right now, it's been real busy. Every day we've been having customers, but you know, a group of this size, and you can see everything's being picked over real hard right now. Of course, we got to catch more, you know, pin more stags and everything, but it's always thankful to meet with you guys and be able to go back and talk old times. As long as I can and I'm healthy, I'm gonna be raising chickens. It's been nice having y'all over here, and if y'all are welcome to come visit me anytime.